Recording in
All right, we're a few minutes into the hour already. Does anyone have a good story or something they would like to share with us before we get going today? I see the folks that were on the other call that I was just in haven't joined us here yet. maybe, can we make a tag to the Renaissance Explorers in the do or in Discord and give them this new link? Would it be possible for someone to? I'll do it real quick. There's slight confusion between us shifting up to our more permanent links now, but I do think this is a good change. Thanks, Anna, for taking all of that on and doing that. Oh, and you're making a post. So I'll let you do that. Do either of you feel like doing our drop-in grounding today? Okay. All good, all good. Anyone with a good story or something to share? I know we have one.
There seems to be so much going on. I'm worried about sharing something that has missed something important. So I'm not going to say anything at this stage.
All good then. Yeah, it's weird. Everyone who is on my link that I gave this link to, they're still not here. So hopefully they're not lost in the ether. But let's get going anyway. So what if for our drop-in today, we can, let's just do a little bit of a quiet mode of silence. Unless someone wants to play any musical instruments that they might have near them. No, I got one. You're gonna have to tell me if the sound comes through very nicely or not. So let me know if you can hear this. You can hear it? Huh, fun. Cool, maybe we can play this. All right, well then we're just gonna do this for like 30 seconds, 1 minute, give some more time for people to show up, but feel free to close your eyes, take some big, full, deep breaths. A reminder to pull your shoulders back, actually really open up your lungs. You forget sometimes to take those big, full, deep breaths throughout the day. I love being reminded to do it. Another big breath, and then let's dive in for the day. So we've got a smaller group, about half the size we usually get. I'm hoping that's not because of the disconnect with email, but here we are. Actually, it might be. No, it's not. It's a different one. Ah, the link you sent me is different from the link that I tapped in there. So anyway, I messed up with the guys in the last call, and I sent them an improper link. But it looks like they're finding it now. Okay, so let's kick it off for the day. Always technical something. So what do we have planned for episode 10? So a little bit of a drop in already happened. So second step, as always, consent proposals. Does anyone have any proposal that they brought through the Renaissance Explorer system that they're now ready to bring up for group consent? So, name of the guide. No, I think we solved that one last time. Name of citizen, visitor, resident. I think that one still is on the table. Julio mentioned that he was taking that somewhere, but I don't see him on the call today. So scratch that. Does anyone have any consent proposals? Okay. We might have failed today, guys. People are telling me that in order to get access, never mind. Anna, you're taking care of it. I'll stay on topic. Yes, anyway, so consent proposals. None? Great. We have Explorer groups. Any sharings from any of the Explorer groups that happened the previous week? All right. I do have one announcement. Anna Los wants to host next week's Renaissance Explorers and dive more into the Thrivability Index that we brought up last week. And it got a lot of excitement as one of the Explorer groups. That's something she's moving forward with. So just reach out to her directly if taking on that Thrivability Index, which is a process we could put proposals through as well. And then RE can give them a rating based on how thrivable that proposal might be. And then the same thing can be used to help rank organizations with how thrivable they are, and same thing with regions. So it's pretty broad sweeping how much of an impact this particular index can have. So I think it's really important, and she can introduce that next call. All right, so what we have planned for the rest of the day is I was going to take some time to talk about system design philosophy. So how we might approach designing these systems as we're going forward. The concept of trustless, what does that actually mean in these systems? And finally, what are we governing anyway? So this is really alive in the community right now, and we're about to step into the governance section of the handbook guide. That's what it's called now, never mind. And I think might be really helpful for us to get a foundation of the concept of governance and what does that process actually mean. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add to the agenda, or any changes or modifications they might make to this agenda? Great. Well, then I will stop sharing this and I will come back to see you all. I'm gonna bring up something that I wrote, and it's coming off of a quote that I've repurposed. And it's, a system does exactly what it's designed to do. The only question is that what the designer wanted? Right? So systems do exactly what they're designed to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that was our intention. And why I bring this up is, or another way of looking at this is, the agents of the system are never the problem. So if you're designing a system and the people that are engaging with that system, the outcome and the intention is different than what you want, you can never blame the agents and say the agents are engaging in the system in an improper way. No, what needs to change is the system, because the system needs to have the outcome that you're looking for without requiring the agents change their behavior, have some fundamental shift in how they want to behave in order to have that outcome. Otherwise, it's very unlikely your system's going to have that outcome, and we're going to have all the weird side effects that we always get in systems. We call them side effects, which is that obnoxious word that we've made up, is that they're just effects. A side effect, even in the pharmaceutical word, is it's really, that system did all of these things. We look at all those things and we say, oh, that's the one I wanted, that's the effect, and everything else is a side effect. So trick of hand and this weird word we give to these things that just happen, but we didn't want them to happen, so we've named them differently. No, those are all outcomes of the system, right? Why do I share this? we see it really alive, and it's alive in me right now because I'm saying, hey, you know, campaigns weren't designed for that. So I've got this complaint in me, and some of you might have read it, is that I'm seeing campaigns be used differently than how I wanted them to be used. But they're being used the way people are wanting them to be used and what the system allows. So, you know, I can't be frustrated at the agents of the system. I can't sit there and say they need to change their behavior and use these differently. What we do as architects and designers of systems is we say, if that's not the outcome we were going for, then the system was poorly designed. And we got to look at how to redesign the system in order to have the outcomes that we're looking for, not how to redesign the agents and change behavior. So I think that's really important as we go through this guide and as we design this economy, is we have to assume the agents aren't going to change their behavior. And when we're coming from systems, you know, of capitalism and exploitation and self-interest and myopic short-term thinking, we have to recognize that this is how some agents are going to behave. And I'm not at all suggesting that's how agents are behaving in seeds. What I'm saying is that's how agents are behaving in economic systems, because that's what's being rewarded and encouraged and facilitated in the old systems. So as we design new ones, I think we have to keep that in mind. We can't design systems that require a fundamental paradigm shift in how we show up in order for that system to work. And sometimes I see that, you know, philosophy and thinking come into these systems where we say, oh, well, no, we've got to just trust people. You know, I know people will do the right thing if we give them the tools, and it'll be magical and beautiful and wonderful. That thinking breaks every single, you know, well-meaning, intentional community, beautiful idea. Because they all come into it saying, oh, everyone's just going to fundamentally change how they want to behave and blah, 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 and it's all going to work. It doesn't, and it fails. And then they're sitting there scratching their head saying, you know, why do humans suck? You know, and if you're an architect and a designer of systems and you ever find yourself thinking, why do humans suck? That's a mirror, because what you did is you sucked. You didn't design a good system. So you're at fault here if you design that system, right? So, you know, if humans are sucking, you know, you're the ones that's sucking, build a better system. So that's my rant on that. So as we go through and design, you know, the system, that's how I would love for us to always be framing it, is let's assume all actors are bad. And that's not to say that, you know, all people are bad. It's to say there will be bad actors. And we need to design the system to assume everyone is a bad actor. Otherwise, the bad actors are going to have the leg up. And we've just rebuilt the exact same system we have now, where a minority of people who want to abuse the system get away with it, and it works for them. So that's not necessarily what we're wanting to recreate, right? Or at least it's not what I wanted to recreate. I think that's a really, you know, broad and far-reaching concept. So I wanted to just plant that and then have us dive into a real quick breakout session and come back. So this one's going to be there's some hands up. If you want to reflect in the whole group, great, but there will be a breakout in order to reflect and then harvest that back in. So if you want to reflect before we break out, please put your hand up. Otherwise, there'll be a 5-minute breakout. We'll just dive into this real quick and come back with a harvest. Michael, what do you got?
Ricky, thank you. I just wanted to add that one of the important things in a design of a system is the ability to adapt and respond very quickly to external stimuli. And in the dashboard that you presented last week, you know, just everything about the design that you've put together here supports this ability to respond very, very quickly. So there's no way that you or any designer of a system can know upfront all of these things I have to cater for. So what's much more important is designing for the very rapid response. And I see this unfolding right now. So I just wanted to offer that as a bit of support in what is unfolding right now. It's, to me, a beautiful exposition of this is how living systems respond, as opposed to an economic system that we have right now that cannot respond in any way. I think it's all beautiful.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for grounding that. And when I'm saying, you know, I designed, you know, the original campaign system, whilst that is mostly true, you know, that's probably did 90% of it, we're designing the system going forward. So as we're coming up with new ideas and we're expecting, you know, behavior to change in order for those ideas to work, let's get rid of that line of thinking. And also, if we ever find ourselves in a group being frustrated by how the agents are acting within the systems we've designed, let's always remember, okay, well, we've got to tweak the system then. Let's not tweak the agents. All right, so a real quick, I cannot do breakouts. So we're not going to have breakouts this session because we didn't set it up for this particular call. So as I was, Instead, what we're going to do is if anyone has,
I can do breakouts if you need to.
You can set them up?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
or
Because
I'm
not the host.
Right.
Check. Yes, could you design breakouts so that there's 3 people for each one?
Wait, I'll do better. Can you do it now?
Okay, I can do it. All right, cool. So we're going to do 3 to 4 folks each one, and I will see you on the other side. So this is going to be real quick. So just shotgun the ideas, generate the harvest, and we'll come back here in 5 minutes. And as always, if you see me join your room, just ignore me. I'm going to record. All right, you all know the drill. If you are delivering the harvest, go ahead and put your hand up. And try to keep your harvest shares to about 60 to 90 seconds. And if you go around 2 minutes, I'll very abruptly ask you to pass off. Bart, start us off.
We were talking about the importance that systems can change easily. Anything that is designed needs to be able to change on high speed to be able to change the things that are necessary to get rid of side effects that we don't like to see. And we were talking about the voting system that we have right now after that, of which I personally thought it's weird that we have to vote on everything. Why do we have to know about everything? Yeah, and I thought fundamentally I have a whole different idea about how the voting system could look like, but we didn't go deeper into that, and I also think that's a much longer story. But these 2 things we talked about, and I think that was more or less it. Can pass it on. Should I pass it on to the next hand? I can pass it on to Mila.
Yes, I'm representing John and Daya Jaggers. So in brief, what we were agreeing on is participative design. And within that is the intention is to work with the audience and also design for the audience, meeting them where they're at, But also before we design is also looking at our own mental models in creating that design. Where is it coming from? And also including within that design some kind of feedback loop that not only questions the iterative process of the design and the outcome, but also the mental models that created it and challenge our own assumptions. Where did that come from and how is it informing the design itself? Because the existing design of our current world, like capitalism, is exactly made the way it was. It's not broken. It's coming from a mental model of profit before everything else. So mindful of unintended consequences, but actually challenging the culture, the mental model, the mindset and the assumptions where it came from. Not only from designers, but also the audience that the design is for and with. That's it. Over to you, Max.
Thank you, Mila. I was in a group with Neil and Guy. Sadly, Guy dropped out and hasn't returned yet. Oh, there he is. But he couldn't finish his sentence. But he did say that, and we all agreed, that not blaming the agent is very important to keep in mind, and not trying to manipulate the agent into a behavior that we want, but rather react to what that agent really needs. There was a slight disagreement with the whole taking the worst as our target, like design that there can't be any bad actors in there, just because it can make you unaware of what is actually needed right now, what is a necessity for the people, for the agents there. And we just fear that there might be people that are actually not present. So that there needs kind of, you also have to have the good actors in mind and have to be very connected to what is really needed in the moment, rather than fearing something. And there's also the point that we are also still learning. We are also agents that act sometimes in a bad way unknowingly, and that the designers themselves are not quite free of all the I would say ailments, so that there is kind of the awareness of where it's coming from needs to be cultivated, and rather than what did we do? That makes sense. Anyhow, so yeah, I think that's basically it. Michael, how are you?
Thanks, Max. Hi. I was in a call with Anna and Rachel, and because I'm quite a bit older than both of them, in fact, probably older than both of them combined, I could talk a little about Donella Meadows and her book, Thinking in Systems, and specifically the world that she was in at the time that the book was written, because I'm old enough to remember that world, which was in the early 1970s, I think, if I'm not mistaken about that. And one of the things she said very strongly in that book is that behavior is determined by the system itself. So if you think about if we were agreeing to meet for dinner, the restaurant itself, the kind of food on the menu, the wine list itself, all of those things conspire to change our decisions within that system. And yet we think we have free choice. So it's a very important concept to be able to recognize how much the system determines the behavior within that system. Now, in Donella Meadows' world, we did, nowadays we take blockchain and transparency and all that kind of stuff for granted. She did not have that in her world when she was talking about how systems affect behavior. So the beautiful thing we have right now is the transparency and the very rapid response mechanisms, where if we see something happening, we can literally adapt and adopt new systems on the fly, which was not possible in Donella Meadows' world back in those days. So we just had a brief conversation around that. I found it a very rich exchange of ideas, and hopefully we could condense some of that. Anna or Rachel, anything you want to add, please jump in. Cool, thanks.
Great, Enrique. Thanks, Michael.
All right. In our group with Apostol and João, we discussed basically using the campaigns case as a reference, and we saw, looking backwards, we can see that many of the intended outcome was not reflected in the criteria that we used to approve the projects. So we're just discussing how it could look like and trying to apply this reference of how do we design and redesign systems to the campaigns itself. So at the end, we see that there's much less to blame on the agents and more how can we make it better and improve it, and also not get shocked by the fact that it happened, because it will happen many times, and it's part of the process to keep redesigning it until we get better and better outcomes.
Ooh, so I took some notes and a little bit of summary of what I gathered. And it's worth maybe repeating a few more of these things. One thing on rapid change. So right now, absolutely rapid change is what we want. However, changing things that are currently live still require a 90% unity, which is actually really high. And that might even be a question that we can bring up later is, is 90% too high? But, another topic for another time. But what we can do with rapid change is us as Renaissance explorers, we're updating this guide. We're creating something that we're going to propose to the community to say, this is what we see as a ratified document. So a lot of the stuff we're seeing, we could actually alter in the guide itself. So for example, if we want to change campaigns real time right now and how they're being used today, we'll have to put up a proposal to change them. But if instead we say, hey, this is what we'd like to see campaigns being, we could put that straight into the guide already. And then we can propose that as a wholesale solution, which actually might be required for some of the things that we want to implement. Because with any system, there's a lot of dependencies. Things rely on each other, or they require each other in order for them to work. So when we're redesigning the system, we're going to do it in a wholesale way where every piece that we tweak is going to be dependent on the other one, and we need them all to pass simultaneously, which is why we're going to propose a whole guide as a wholesale, shift in the game. So anyway, this is to be said that we can react and respond really rapidly today. So we've been engaging in the system, we're living it real time, and we can take those tweaks to the guide. But this isn't something we want to continue. Once this gets going and there are a few million people, or even if one person's livelihood is dependent on seeds, we don't want there to be rapid changes anymore. That's not a system that people really want to, feel stable and secure in. If things are going to be rapidly changing and evolving, and they're expecting to come back and constantly figure out what's all the new things that are happening. So we get the luxury of being able to have rapid change now while the system's, immature, and we haven't ratified our first game. But after we do, changes will be more difficult to get through. But that's part of the design, and that's necessary because we don't want it to be a chaotic system. So we're keeping that in mind. It's a very important stage that we're in right now. We want to do as much experimentation as possible before we put up this first guide as the official guide. Second thing, checking our mental models. That's why it was really important to bring the guide through this group of 22 plus humans, so that we could check the mental models beyond the mental models of the people who originally designed the guide. So that's literally what we're doing here, and why we use a consent process for any of at the start of this call, we had that consent proposal. So someone brings a proposal, say, I want to change the guide this way. Consent meaning as long as nobody blocks. So that's how we're checking our mental models. We're saying, okay, actually that mental model is broken, and it's broken because of these reasons. So that's what we're doing here in a tribe community, RE. And something that I want to ground and reinforce is when you're blocking something, if you do, then there needs to be an argument behind it. So there's an argued block. It's, I'm blocking this because, and then you've got to make your case. And then the rest of the community gets to decide, well, maybe your case is also a broken mental model, and that's not a, a clear block. So that could, anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Last thing. I really appreciate the reframing of, what does the agent need? But if we're thinking of the agent as part of the system and the system's all of us and we're all connected and we look at it that way, well, what the agent needs is what the whole needs. And sometimes we can't meet the myopic interests and the needs of an agent individually at the expense of the whole. So I know it's like one of those cultist ideologies where we've got to put the, the whole ahead of the individual. But that's one of those things that I think are a healthy ideology. But what I'm hoping is part of this renaissance is that, we're putting the needs of the individual and the whole at the same level. So I kind of explained this in another place where, communism, why it got such a bad rap, at least how we perceive of it in the terms that we like to look at history in, was let's look at the whole above the individual. And a lot of individuals were feeling like they were, losing their rights and it wasn't serving them. Why capitalism is the exact opposite. And these are very simplistic terms, but it's just, anyway, the mental model is there's a concept of, the whole being more important than the individual, which I feel like is a false concept. And the inverse, which is true in capitalism, which is the individual is the most important and it's more important than the whole. What I think is really vital in the new systems we're building is to bring those into harmony. So what does that mean in real time? That we might have to say, yeah, we know that you need, to be able to pay your rent right now, but the seeds ecosystem isn't mature enough to be able to pay you to pay your rent right now. So we're going to have to figure out a new way to do that rather than just say, well, we're going to try to pay your rent because that's what you need. So sometimes we might not be able to meet the individual's needs depending on the maturity of the system. Once we reach a mature ecosystem, if we're not meeting all of the needs of the individuals in that system, then we maybe failed or we need to continue evolving our system. But I think we have to be very mindful of what stage of the evolution of the system we're in and how many needs we can actually meet. So I think Daya, you said that before, where we're putting out this perspective that people can show up and get paid and maybe start earning a universal basic income today and be able to meet all of their needs through participating in seeds in a certain capacity. But that's not true for the majority, and I think we need to maybe make that clear as well if it's not. So there's a lot of my opinions on that. I want to pause to check my mental models. If anyone's heard me say something that you felt like was a complete in truth for you, I'd love to have that reflected back before we keep going forward.
If I may just pick up on something that Mila's mentioned earlier, in that around mental models and specifically the existing model that we think is no longer working. And that's a generalization. Many people in the change agent space believe that the current system is not working. And that's not true at all. It is working beautifully. If you take into account the fact that we are currently in civilizational collapse, and one of this, and we've been through many of them before, there's 30 in the past 6,000 years. One of the common signals is there's always a grab for last resources. So think of the man cutting down the last tree on Easter Island. What went through his mind as he was doing that? And there's always the case of, but it's mine. I can get access to it, and so I'm going to grab it. And all of our systems, including the entire neoliberal economic system, is designed to do precisely that. So it's working beautifully. And now it becomes our choice. Do we want to step into part of that collapse, or do we want to build something that parallels that system as we step up? But to check ourselves every time we think that the current system is broken, it's not. It's working exactly as designed. Adam Smith in 1776 predicted all of the stuff that we're seeing right now. So this is not out of the ordinary. It's not even climate change. All of this stuff that we're going to be hearing about very soon, that we have to change climate by throwing money at it, is all part of the design of this economic system. And we have to keep checking ourselves. There's lots of detail of this, which I can share outside of this call if necessary.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to wrap around how we started this, is every system's doing exactly what it's designed to do. And I think it's even aligned with the intention. Our current capitalistic systems, they were designed by a minority of capitalists, and it was designed primarily to defend their wealth against the populace, while giving an illusion of freedom. At least that's how I have a very non-favorable outlook at that system. But under that guise, that's exactly what's happened. It's concentrated wealth, it's given the minority an incredible amount of voice, and it's kept the population at large at bay and allowed that concentration of wealth and power to continue to happen. So when anyone says our current system's broken, I'd say it's not. It's working beautifully, and it's probably one of the best design systems I've ever seen. If you're looking to do that, it's doing that marvelously. Brilliantly too. Okay, let's dive in a little bit more. Next on our agenda today. This is another really important design philosophy. I've talked about this a couple times, but it's the idea of trustless systems. So this is, Michael, you had brought this up, that this is something that we haven't had until now. We haven't had this idea of transparent open systems that could be evolved real time. So we don't really have a historical record of best practices to look back on. It's the same thing we come across with economics. There are some things that were just not physically possible with economic systems a century ago when our current ones were designed. They didn't have digital economic layers. They had physical tokens that needed to move around, and no one knew how much those physical tokens were moving around. There was no central ledger that's saying this is how all the token flows are going. So they literally didn't have the tools to be able to map an economic system and be able to, design one. Anyway, so that's to say, what does a trustless system mean? It means you don't have to trust anyone to engage in the system. So, blockchain or Bitcoin, for example, you don't have to trust that someone's going to send you something or something happened, because you're able to go to the blockchain and look for yourself and see for yourself that yes, it happened. What you have to trust is you have to trust in the security of that system. And that brings a pretty high layer of trust along with it. But that's the only thing you have to trust. You don't have to trust somebody's word. Right now with central banks, you put your money in that bank and you have to trust that bank that money is going to be there. But, that money could be stolen. The state could steal it. They can withhold it. They could say that your credit card was frozen and you can't spend it anymore. There's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't necessarily trust that system. But what else does trustless mean? When we're designing a system, we can design so that we don't have to trust someone. And we can have a really live example of that today with campaigns. So campaigns, we're saying, hey, these are public funds that are used to support the growth of the seeds ecosystem. And the community is saying, let's distribute these public funds for different ideas that people are coming up with. But we designed a trusted system, not a trustless system, because then we send those funds to a single individual. And then we have to trust that individual to follow through with what they said they needed to do. So we built a trusted system. And then we have all of these carry-on effects where we have to, follow up with that individual, make sure that they did what they said they were going to do, et cetera, et cetera. All of these extra steps that have to be built on because we introduced that need for trust. Are we following so far? So how can we build a trustless system? In this particular case, we can use escrow accounts. If we said, hey, you said that you're going to send 1,000 invites to, or send 200 seeds to 1,000 invites, and you asked for 200,000 seeds to do that. Well, what we can do is we can design a smart contract that says, okay, we're going to put these funds in an account, the 200,000 seeds, and they can only be sent as an invite carrying 1,000 seeds. So we don't have to trust that that person's going to send them out as an invite anymore. We also don't have to trust that they're going to follow through with what they said they're going to do because they're sitting in an escrow account. And then what we can do is we can program into that escrow account. If they're not used for that intended purpose, they get sent back to the hole. So now we don't even have to follow up with that person. They can send them out as invites. That's all they can do. And then if they don't follow through with it and they don't do it, they're automatically sent back to the system. So we removed the need for us to actually trust someone. And what's so beautiful about this, if we can design systems where we don't have to trust people, we're going to trust people a lot more. Because that we can take a lot more risks. Someone can come in and say they're going to do something and we could trust them. We'll be like, yep, you're going to do that. I have full faith in you, but I can have all that faith and I don't have to check up because I know you can't cheat the system. So I'm just going to trust you. But if people can easily cheat the system, now you have to be distrustful from the beginning. Or if you're not, then the system is going to collapse if we're not, But anyway, so now we have to actually vet people. We have to show up and say, ooh, can I trust you? I'm not sure if I can trust you. How trustworthy are you? What's your reputation? How are you going to use this? How are you going to follow up? What processes are going to put you through to make sure you're going to do what you say you're going to do? So we have to have all of this extra burden built on top of that because we decided to have a trusted, middleman in that situation. That's a big concept, and I'm not sure if I conveyed it effectively. So I want to know if that made sense. Otherwise, I'm going to give another example. I want someone to like actually unmute themselves and reflect back if they got that.
Made sense to me, Reiki, but I also have read a lot about this concept, so it's quite familiar to me. So it landed with me.
And
It also,
go Anna.
it also landed with me, and I get it. I'm not sure I agree though with the let's build a trustless system so that we can trust people more. I don't think we can get out of that loop, but yeah, it makes sense.
The thing is it doesn't require trust, which is what's so beautiful about it. I mean, of course, in certain places and as far as we go, there's going to be areas where we're going to need to require trust. But the idea and what we're trying to design for is to remove that from the system as much as possible, so that the system can thrive and survive without us needing to build, complicated instead of complex systems to intermediate that trust, i.e. following up and having people go and do due diligence and check to make sure they followed through with what they said they do and vote down their reputation if they didn't. Like all of that is such a headache that we could remove if we built that trustless system to begin with. Julio, then Melanie, then Michael, just go in that order.
I was before Julio.
Oh,
I just
awesome. Yeah,
didn't
take it
put
away.
my hand up. I'm reflecting on the idea of should like, okay, let's start from here. Can everything be trustless? I know how the trustless Bitcoin works, and I have a good grasp of how smart contracts work. But like, for example, we still would need constitutional guardians. That is a trustful element in it, right? And I bet we would need other parts of the system have some trust in them, but at the same time we can also strive to minimize it, because when you have trust you have corruption and all kind of evil come up. So yeah.
Yeah, let me actually, constitutional guardians, another perfect example. And I think we can still consider those trustless. Why? Because game theory kind of makes it trustless. And I'll explain that. Is you're voting for, the 21 people who are going to be the guardians. And 15 out of 21 of those people need to collude in order for something to happen, or agree, depending on how you're looking at it. So ideally, these folks don't actually know each other and they're not best friends or whatever. So the citizens are doing a good job of making sure these folks are distributed across the globe. But what we're saying is there's a really high chance that they can lose this position, which is paying them, if they collude against the citizens' wishes. So that's the game theory right now, is there's a high chance of them not being successful in whatever attack they're wanting to make. They're highly invested in the system anyway, so an attack is an attack against themselves. And if they did do something that the majority of the citizens didn't like, they can lose their position. And it requires 15 out of 21 of them to act in order to make something go forward. So that was the best kind of design of saying we do need some trust, where some humans have some engagement because we haven't automated everything. So this is our trustless way of intermediating that trust. And we can do the same thing with multi-signature contracts. So for example, if someone passes a proposal to say they're going to do something, sure, we can set it into an escrow. And that's the most beautiful, complicated, or complex, intricate way of doing it, which I love. But an intermediate route for things that we can't build a smart contract for, we can then send it to a smart contract where 3 out of 5 people have to agree in order to spend those funds. And it's a lot less trustful to rely on 3 people to have to collude to make something happen rather than 1. And depending on how important it is, you can expand that out to say, well, we're going to make it 7 out of 13 people have to agree, or whatever, depending on how important it is. So that's why constitutional guardians are 15 out of 21. That's a high number because it's a really important thing that's going on there. Does that make sense? Or kind of explaining that? So
yeah, sure. And you can also like put some of the guardians of the funds that are in escrow account to be part of the ecosystem, like outside of the project itself, so they can have like visibility on how they're spent. We could come up with all kind of that kind of good stuff there.
Exactly. Julia.
Yeah, so I don't like this word trustless because I don't believe in this, you know. I understand the intent of using this word, but I think it kind of confuses people, because what we are taking out of the equation is the middleman, you know, the kind of for instance, the insurance company or the bank or the governance that has to, you know, be the intermediate. If you want to send someone an apple, right, you have to pay this man in the middle, this other man in the middle, this other man in the middle, because you don't trust that the process is going to be taken straight from you to that other person. So you have to kind of trust these people in the middle to carry that for you. And then a trustless system is that you don't have to trust someone in the middle, like a government or people in the middle. So I don't really like it, because you are still trusting in the system and trusting in the developers that they don't put enough bugs, or, you know, so in a sense there is still trust. So when you say trustless, it means like, yeah, I don't have to worry about that because it's all safe. But actually, it's better to be trustful in a way that you're minding the trust. Who are you trusting? So what layers are you trusting now? Instead of trusting in individuals or organizations doing that for you, you're trusting in a piece of software that is auditable, that is open source, that you can see what's going on, so that deserves your trust. So if you're trusting an opaque organization, you don't know what's going on. So you kind of have to trust them because there is no other way, and they have the force, they have the power. So maybe sometimes you don't even have options for that. So when you trust in a system that is clearly transparent, auditable, and then that makes much more sense for me, at least. And I want to have systems that allows us to trust directly peer-to-peer, right, with the person that I'm doing transactions with. So I trust this person, and I trust the system is not tampered, so this can be carried on. But when human interactions come into play, and they always do, right, because transferring a currency like Bitcoin, it's easy. You don't need a lot of intermediates. It's just one, right? So in essence, but then doing things like, if you wanted to do like an auction system in smart contracts, then there are so many human interactions going on that the trustless system can't cope with all of that. And you always deal with human interactions at the edges, and that becomes really complicated. So I hear what Apostle said, that maybe not all systems can be made 100% trustless unless we really become kind of robots in a way. So yeah, this is my take on that. Thank you.
Proposal received and accepted. Trustless evolved to trust elevated. So we're elevating what we're trusting to higher degrees of, got it. Trust elevated. Melanie.
Your first question was if I understood what you described. Yes, 100%. And I agree 100%. And I have another 100% to give, because there's never one truth in there. Coming from the cultural aspect, the first thing I would like to say is trust is not something you earn, it's something you give in advance. And if we want to take that part out of the system, I would strongly disagree. And I feel that's not what you meant. I feel with what you described, you rather go in a direction from transparency and from controlling the 99% where we need to control and where we have to have a system which works. And still, I feel we need the human factor in there, which is also important, and where we also need to trust the human factor. One example, one friend of mine is working on systems for railway, and they are testing the heat of the, don't know, Schienen, whatever that is, the things where the trains go on. And the system tells them when they have to stop the trains. In 99% they are right. And in 1%, it's the steam engine that only comes 100 years and which is hotter as it is, meaning you shouldn't stop that. So I feel the trustless system is wonderful if we don't take the human out, meaning coming to Apostle and the guardians. And what we also need is to be able to change it very fast, meaning we are building something which we know is true for now. And it's a bit like nature. So learning from nature again, we need to have a trustless system that can be changed more or less immediately. And what was my last point? No, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're never going to be able to remove the human. I liked what you added, though, with, we give trust up front. And the idea of these trust elevated systems is that becomes a lot easier without having undue harm on this, the whole system at large, or putting ourselves in a harmful places. Michael.
Thanks, Rocky. Just want to add something that is usually overlooked in this trust and trustless debate because it's usually raised by technologists. And the piece that's missing is the maturation of species, which Elizabeth Tarturis explains very eloquently, much better than I can, in that when you have a pioneer species, which is a young and immature species, their tendency is to compete and fight and grab resources and all the rest, but that species matures and becomes a climax species. And their characteristic is more collaboration than a competition. So a technologist who's designing a system will often ignore this maturation of a species and then design a system for the more pioneer species, which is where competition is a hallmark. So we just need to keep that into account. Are we designing systems for a maturing species, which I think we should be doing? Or do we have to concern ourselves so much about human behavior and the fact that there's less trust in a competitive system? Just something to throw into the mix. Thank you.
I love that. And I love, I mean, that's the other design philosophy here. I feel like we probably need to write these things out. Is the idea that this is going to evolve and we can be intentional about those periods of evolution, like we were with seeds with this go live period. We might have more, but anyway, it's going to be reflected organically as we reach tensions. So we're going to find tensions. We're like, hey, our trustless system, we're not able to do all these beautiful things we want to do. Cool, let's change the system so that we can meet our needs in a more effective way. We'll see it mature as our abilities mature. So yeah, love that. I love viewing it that way too. All right, so we're going to be real quick, and Gaia, Yao, and then we'll carry on to the next topic today. Can't hear you, Gaia.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I think trustless, it's a real technical term in a way to be used here, which is, basically what. Really? It's, you can hear me now. I'm on my.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Sound? No?
Yes, we can hear you.
No, I have no idea. I will just.
So I think there's a big delay. So
first of all, like trustless, it's like a really technical term. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just want to mention that it's a really technical. My. Okay. I'm gonna try like this. If it's not working, let's just move to the next one. So again, like trustless is a real technical term that's been used here, which 4 times. Yeah. Thank you. That doesn't mean that we stop having trust. I think Julio said it best. It's really about cutting out the middleman, and it's actually what makes seeds possible. It's this whole idea of a trustless technology is what's creating seeds. But it also brings this layer of anonymity. And I think this layer of anonymity is what we should go against. with seeds. We really should bring like everything out there, make things visible. And for example, with the campaigns, like I don't think we have to see it in the sense of, oh, we have to follow up on them. We need to create a system of control, but we do need to create like feedback loops, like with those people, like people who run campaigns. They should check in with us about how is it going, because that's what we are about. We are trying to create a community, and there's like, yeah, I think we need to sustain that kind of feedback loop. Like at this point, for example, it's even really hard to reach out to campaign proposal because they're kind of anonymous. We have their account name and that's it. We don't have, like, we need to really go and look for contact information. Besides that, I do agree we need to work with escrow accounts. We need to work with deferred seats, definitely towards rewards. And that's all things that can be integrated and can be talked about, of course. And I believe that also in this topic of trust, if we start promoting that campaigns are for lower amounts of seats, like it's easier to trust somebody with $10 than to trust somebody with $1,000, right? So it's also a way of making it more trustless to cap amounts for initial campaign makers, yeah, which are all proposals that are put forward, but probably not on the right platforms yet. So I will move on with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to elaborate a little bit there because I think that's super important. You said a couple things like, you know, we could follow up with them, or we can have support systems to make sure that, you know, we're supporting them to help them do what they need to do. And, you know, I would say anything that's going down that line of thinking is probably a path we don't want to go down. So anytime we find ourselves going into a fork where it's going to require that we design someone to follow up with them, or design someone to support them in order for it to work, or anything like that, I think we're setting ourselves up for something that's not going to work out well, or be over-engineered, or cause a lot of frustration, follow through, and it's not going to work, as it's already not working, and we're at a very small scale. This thing's not going to scale much further. So that's why I'm more in favor of some of the other routes where, for example, the proposals I'm putting forward is that we're not having any funding proposals in seats, because there's no systems in place for us to follow through, and that would be overly complicated for us to design those things. So what instead do we do is we have those global dues where they just get funding based on whatever percentage they're holding. And I think there's some really epic ideas to support that. But that's the thing, you don't have to follow up with them. They get their, you know, 10% of the funds that are coming out, and that's it. They're getting that because they were delegated that, and there's no one needing to actually check up on them. All the, you know, responsibility is on them to come to the citizens to say, this is what we're doing. So we reverse that. We don't say the system needs to follow up on them. They need to follow up with the system to continue to earn that percentage, right? And this is why we can bake into the protocol to say, you know, all of the percentages that people put out are reset every 3 months. This is actually part of one of the proposals out there. And that's one of the reasons, is because then that requires the organization that's wanting to get that funding, they're the ones that are needing to do the follow-up. They're the ones that are needing to reach out to the citizens and let them know what they're doing in order to earn their votes. And they have to do that, you know, every quarter in order to continue to earn the votes. We can come up with a really beautiful ceremony where every quarter all the organizations come together and talk about all the great stuff they're doing. But then there's no point where the system itself has to follow up with the orgs. We've removed that out of the system. Right. And then the same thing with invite campaigns is they go right into an escrow account. We don't have to trust that they're going to use them as they say they are. They're going to be forced to be used that way, right? Or sent back to the campaign, you know, account if they're not. So that's the type of thinking that I think is going to be able to scale well, is where it doesn't require anyone in the seeds ecosystem to do some follow-up in order for something to happen the way we want it to happen. Anytime I think we start going down that logic, we're not going to be happy. Strong opinions, but they're there. Yeah.
I like it when you call me Yao. Thank you. I was thinking my idea was to categorize some of the campaigns. Then we can see what the criteria they must have to put up that campaign forward. And if one of the criteria is like to having a storytelling for bringing for we could like inside the category of replanting the world, we're going to see like many of the fields that was planting in the same category, you know, and we can see what the results would be if we categorize these campaigns in global aspect. And by local, we can see more, in my point of view, we can track better. We can we have connected with what is happening, and that's why we want to know if it's happening. And we also could create for local communities that must have also DHO for HBO region to keeping these campaigns aligning, but also for the campaigns for happening, not having to put in the shoulders what they must do, like storytellings or things like that, but only do what they say that they wouldn't like to do, you know. For the DHOs and locals, giving more for them this task of bringing the metrics for the global, and then being able to apply for another funds. That's, you know, and I was thinking steps where a campaign it's starting in a local, they can win some by escrow campaign, and also other feel for having autonomy, and then it can claim or more trust inside seats, something like that. Sorry for not making it clear.
Ooh, I'm going to try to not respond to any more that was said, because we're going to move on to the next thing that we have today. That was incredible shares. Thank you all. So the last thing we have to cover today, we have 20 more minutes. Great. Come back to the agenda. So what are we governing anyway? What is all the point of this? So what I'm doing now is some of the rest of section 1. It's really detailed, and we're not quite ready for some of those areas. So it's the contribution score for organizations, where we get into with regions, etc. And I don't think we're at to the point where we want to start diving into that stuff, and badges and stuff. So anyway, I think we're going to come back to the rest of section 1 later, when we have a little bit more designed, such as that thrivability index. I think that's going to play a big role in the contribution scores for both organizations and regions. And the contribution score is also something that we can help, you know, build trust, is then you can trust in the organizations that are giving these thrivability indexes. But what we don't want to do is have one organization giving a thrivability index. We want, you know, one organization giving that index, but then someone else doing a regenerative index, and someone else doing whatever. So what we'd like is having, you know, eventually, as this matures, you know, maybe 30 different organizations who are actually analyzing, you know, things and giving their own ratings. So that's how we would want, again, this to scale, so that we're not trusting one institution to make all the decisions. So we've got to stay away from those types of designs. All right. Cool. So some first thoughts here. So what is it that we're actually governing? And so what are the founding questions that we're asking here? So this is the first question that I would have for us as we start transitioning into governance, is for us to consider, you know, what are we governing anyway? You know, what is the intention of our governance systems? And I'm going to do something that's a little bit of a polarity. Is our systems, you know, are we setting up decentralized governance systems so that everyone's voice is equally heard? Or are we setting up our governance system so that we're having optimal decisions being made? And I feel like those are actually mutually exclusive. At least that's my opinion on it. Sometimes, so depending on what we want to prioritize, we're going to design this a little bit differently. So some people might come into this and say, hey, you know, we think it's unfair because every single person should have the same level of voice. Like, this is an unequal system if that's the case. You know, so that's an opinion, and that's a, you know, a value that would lead to, you know, we're designing a governance system where everyone's voice is equally heard. If instead we're saying we're wanting a, you know, a system where people who, they're dedicating their lives to this and they're taking time to really understand the proposal, maybe they should have more voice than someone else who, used seeds one time to, buy some food at a farmer's market. So that's when we're saying, okay, well, we're actually going to try to design this system to have optimal outcomes, and we're going to think about it differently. And we're going to start weighing voice depending on like provable outcomes of who might be making the best decisions. And that's a different direction that we're going to go. And inevitably, it's not going to be, equal voice and equal representation. It's going to be disequal voice, but that voice is going to be something that's earned and something that you build through contributing to the system and demonstrating, knowledge and commitment, et cetera. So I think those are two different paths that we need to take. And if we take one, we need to be very clear we're taking that path and we're not taking the other path or whatever path is being taken. Otherwise, it's always going to be frustrating. If we go down the path where we're trying to make optimal outcomes, people are going to always be showing up as they already do and say, this isn't decentralized because this person has more voice than this person, and it's a value statement that comes out there and is going to cause a lot of frustration. So we have to be really clear about what path we're going down and why we're going down that. And then that's what we're measuring success based off of. We're saying, are we making really good decisions? If we go down the other path, great. That's the direction we want to go. We're making better decisions, and let's keep upgrading our system to make more and more better decisions. Okay, so that's something that I don't want an answer to right now. I want us to think about, and then we can start off next session, really diving into that because it's really alive in the community today, and it's going to continue to be. I remember just anecdote, someone made a really big deal early on that we were calling seeds a co-op. Because technically, apparently, at least one person's definition of a co-op is one member, one vote. So every vote has the same member, or every member has the same vote. But what we actually see as the downside of that is then, cooperatives, they get really tight. The membership is really hard because that membership, the voice is going to be highly diluted, and they want to make sure up front. So this is where we start getting into that trusted system. Before they let someone in, they want to make sure they can trust them. They don't give them trust up front and then let them in and then see how it goes and it doesn't harm the system. They have to say, before we let this person in, because they're going to have a pretty big voice, I need to make sure I trust them in advance. And some co-ops actually stop letting new members in altogether because they don't want to dilute their voice anymore. So this is something we need to be mindful of, is the limitations of each one of these systems and where they might apply. So it might make more sense within a do context, like an organization or a smaller community, to do one person, one vote. But maybe it doesn't make sense for us to do that on our global systems. So we get to also decide, what path we want to go down, depending on the scale of the system we're designing. So that's why I think we also, as we start going down this governance topic, there's a couple different, starkly different categories of how we're doing governance. We're doing it on the global level, seeds-wide governance, and then we're going to have regional and organizational governance being done in the do. So, and I think they're going to be completely different designs, how those are going to pan out. So yeah, that's the other thing to be thinking about is, how many people are going to be participating in this governance system? At what scale is it going to be? Because depending on that scale is a different system. Because within a do, for example, you can do follow-up. If you only have 30 members, follow-up is actually something that's inherently built into it. Someone says they're going to do something, they come back and say, yeah, I've done that. And members are actually checking that they've done that, signing it off and moving it forward. So you can have that feedback loop in a regional, smaller container that we can't have and we can't scale if you're trying to do that globally. So it's something to be mindful of, again, is what scale are we trying to govern? And what I suggest as we go through this, for us to just think about seeds as a global system. So that's what we're first going to go through governance with that perspective, is how are we governing the global system? And then later on, we can get into how are we going to do regional governance or organization governance. All right. So what are some things that I've put here, and that we can certainly redesign these and try to find the 4 most important things we want to introduce this section with. But here are the questions we're asking ourselves is, how do we create a new form of collective intelligence system that is an explicit service to the evolution of humanity and whole systems thrivability? So that's one of our governance questions here. Maybe that's a mouthful, maybe we can simplify that. But we're looking for, how can we serve the evolution of humanity and whole systems thrivability? I think those are actually 2 things, but it's worth stating them out separately. And then a second criteria that we're trying to govern is, collective intelligence systems that increase in complexity. So these things are getting more intelligence, more nuanced and more intricate as it evolves, just like any living system does. Ones that are responsive to our exponentially changing environments. So we want our system to be able to continue to update, but maybe not too fast, but it's something we want to make sure we bake into this. So, as we're thinking about what quorums and what scale or what quorums and what unities that proposals need to pass, this is something that we want to think about is, are we allowing us to be responsive? And then of course, it's just grounding it again to help us coordinate to address our crises today. What are we starting with? We need a foundation. So we're not trying to solve everything as we go through this. We're just looking for the minimal viable governance system to launch. So it's complex enough to serve our needs today and give rise to ordered intelligence to build on top of that. So we're looking at just the minimal viable governance system to get started with. That's enough pieces to tweak to keep us going. So this is, so this section is about attempting to give that minimal viable governance system that an economy needs. So that's the premise, the design criteria we have going into this. That's all I'm going to share for today. What I'm going to do is open it up one more time if anyone has any immediate reflections about some goals they feel like are really high enough to put on there. I'd love to hear from you.
If no one, I see Julio has his hands up, but I like to comment on, I think I heard you say that you think right now a basic income isn't possible yet in seeds. I completely understand that. And yes, a basic income in many ways is not very easy in seeds. I think I designed a proposal in a way that it can already be possible right now and that it actually stimulates the growth of seeds. And I really like to share more about that. I think it's a longer story, so I see other hands are up, so maybe go there first and end with this.
Yeah, so what we can do is let's hear from Julio, John, and anyone else who wants to share about this on the governance side. And then after everyone's done, we can pass it to you, Bart. And then people who need to leave in 10 minutes can. Whoever wants to stay on and continue talking about that basic income proposal can stay on and continue to discuss that. Feel good?
Yeah, and on the governance side, I like to make a thread about it in discourse, but I'd like to take some more time for that. So ready to pass it on.
Thank you for volunteering to do that so that we can capture some of this wisdom on the discourse. Thanks, Bart. Julio.
So yeah, regarding governance, one thing I would like to talk about is about this perception that due diligence doesn't scale. So we need to delegate to organizations that can do that for us. So this goes back to the idea of trustless systems that we were talking in the past. So if due diligence doesn't scale, maybe because we don't have systems in place, very think truly and in the blockchain to do this due diligence, right? Because for instance, when we tried that with the proposals, right now we have a evaluation kind of phase where people can go there and see which proposals are being, what are they doing, but we don't have any game elements yet to encourage people to do due diligence. So and then we assume that it just doesn't work, so let's give the power to the do's so they kind of select how are they going to select proposals for them, you know. So maybe, for instance, one idea that came here, this could be a proposal. Actually, I plan to write some about this in the forum, but maybe in order for you to vote, if you voted on a proposal and the proposal is currently under evaluation, you have to check the evaluation form that you are, do the due diligence before you can vote again. So if you are using your votes for a proposal, so maybe you are trusting that you are using your power in that, your decision power in that way. So you have to kind of keep following that guys until they complete, and they say they complete what they say they would do before you can get your votes back again. So maybe that's just one idea, but what I mean is, why don't we think about a system to allow due diligence to be transparent and easy to do, and instead of saying, yeah, this is too hard in a large scale, so we have to split it and give power to organizations or dues that are going to do this. And so I still wanted to voice my concern of, when we give power to organizations or individuals so they can do the stuff that is too hard for us to do, we are kind of moving power to them, and without going back to the kind of trusted systems that we want to build around. So that's my perception, and that's I intend to write some more about this in the forum to allow us to visualize ways to how to do due diligence in a light way and in a gamified way that this is fun and allows us to track what's going on. So yeah.
Just a quick reflection to that is another consideration to consider. And as we're talking about governance systems and at what scale we're governing, if, for example, we're asking people to do due diligence in a 10 million person system or 100 million person, or however big seeds might eventually be, then we're considering the hours that are going into that. If every person's doing 1 hour of due diligence, then, is that 100 million hours of human time, well spent, or 1 million hours, or however much. So that's something else to consider, is if we're asking the individuals to do that, how does that actually play in? If that's a requirement for it to be successful. Why the inverse could be that we're requiring the proposal to make sure that they're getting that follow-up. And then it's, we're setting thresholds where they were required to, talk to 1,000 people or whatever. Because then we could set a limit to say that, 1,000 hours is what we're willing to give to this proposal. We're not going to ask the system to dedicate 1 million hours of human time towards something. We're going to cap the system to say you need to get 1,000 hours of human time, or whatever cap we want to put on it. And then that's reversing how we would actually design that process. One example of that is in Haifa. We have we have a 20% quorum. So someone that's coming up to try to pass someone, they need to go out and receive 20%. So they need to get, go out there and request that someone does due diligence on their proposal in order to get them to 20. So it's something that it's in the hands of the proposal to go and make sure that due diligence is done on their proposal. But we're not asking 100% of the members to go through and analyze every proposal. We're only asking 20% to analyze any proposal. So we've set a threshold there. So it's something to consider as we are designing things. John.
Yeah, sort of at the level of the same level that you were giving those principles of what we're designing for. I think we really need to look at, we've got really three phases that we're really designing for. The governance of. So we're governing ourselves as we attract more people to build a system that can achieve the maturity to be successful at go live. The system that we have for governing that may be different from the system of governance at go live. And the criteria for go live is that it needs to then function within a much broader economic, social, cultural world system in a way that it successfully incents and causes, along with a lot of other influences, will need to happen, regeneration. So that's the whole point of this, right? And at some point, you know, that system merges into or becomes a part of some kind of larger system that we can't even imagine now. So, what it takes to govern that, I don't think we even know. But at least those first elements may be completely different.
These things are too short to get into the depth of, wisdom that's brought to this table. I mean, that's, yes. And something that, Mila just said in the chat as well is, when we're thinking about the scale of governance, so, we use the word fractal a lot and Hellenic a lot. And that's why we're not trying to have a new central global governance system. So that's also why I'm, requesting that we push things to the edges, as permaculture would talk about. And that's why we want to push things into dues and into regions, so that we can have a diversity of cultural and local context for most of the decisions are being made in place. Ideally, very few things need to happen on that global level. So what I would say is, like, the most mature level of seeds is where people show up, they participate in that budgeting exercise. They could do that whenever they want. So it's not something that's required. And then they only participate when there's a referendum. So it's the only things we're doing on a global level. There's the referendums and setting that global budget. That's it. And then the referendums, as we mature, are going to be less and less and being harder and harder to pass. So they're going to have to get a lot more insight and wisdom to come into these things. So that's what we're asking for people on a global level in the most mature system. There's very little interaction on that global level, and most of the interaction in the dues that they're a part of, the organizations they're a part of, the regions that they're a part of, and that's where most of the action we want to be happening in these systems, is on that local and cultural level. At least, again, this is, my biases that I'm throwing out here at all of you. Like, sometimes I'm just putting that on you. The last thing, just to respond to Julia on a comment, which was really good, is you're saying, if we have 10 million people, we have a global proposal, we're not asking 10 million to do the due diligence, but in fact we would be, if that proposal requires, a 5% quorum to pass, then that requires that 500,000 people, vetted that and passed it, and that requires that those 500,000 people are then doing the due diligence and upkeep on it. And if we have global referendums that are changing the game, I think it's very justifiable to ask for 500,000 human hours to change our economic system. And that's where collective intelligence is. I know we're going over, but last concept I want to talk about, and I'll plant with you guys. And that's the difference between, collective intelligence and crowd intelligence. And it's just terms I'm working with right now. Collective being like, we're taking millions of people and we're honing our wisdom onto one proposal and topic. We're taking the collective, we're using that intelligence to figure out one idea. Why hive intelligence is kind of the inverse of that, where every individual is making their own choice, and then we aggregate all of that in order to come up with an outcome. So for example, the budgets are an example of hive intelligence, because if everyone gets to set their own budget and then we aggregate that, then that's how we're determining the budget, opposed to everyone's voting on a fixed budget. So a fixed budget where someone puts up a proposal to say every organ is going to get 10%. And then the collective comes together to vote if that distribution's good. That's collective intelligence. Why hive intelligence is everyone puts up their own percentage, it's aggregated and determined. It's the same thing with, funding proposals versus gratitude. A funding proposal where an idea comes up, let's fund this, yes or no. Everyone comes in and collectively says yes or no. Collective intelligence. Why gratitude, where every person gets to say, ooh, I think that's worth giving value to, and I think that's worth giving value to. And then we aggregate that to distribute the value flows. That's a form of, hive intelligence. So these are two, I'm giving you guys a lot of concepts to work with. That's two major types of governance that are going on right now, is the, collective intelligence types and hive intelligence, or crowd, or however we want to call this form of intelligence. Okay, yeah, that's a lot. I want to pause right now. There's one more minute left in this before we close it out. Does anyone else have anything they want to share as a final thought for today?
I'd like to respond on what you say. I think I agree that it's a really good idea to have this global governance, not like that it's complicated to change it later on in the journey. I think it's important that it is evolving constantly in the design it has, and that, for example, we want to have more and more like blockchain technologies coming in that work on a global level, that measure regenerativity and that measure certain things in a better way, and that we have to have things designed that are fixed but that still allow for global measurements to evolve.
I could just agree with that. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads as well. All right, let this conclude the regular session we have today. Bart's going to bring to the table a proposal about basic income. So if you'd like to stay and engage with Bart on that, now's your moment to do so. If not, then you can wave goodbye and say goodbye to all your lovely friends here. And then I will pass the mic to Bart. I personally will go because I am super tired and I will watch this recording, but I will pass hostmanship to you, Bart. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. I have to say, I personally also feel very loaded of the meeting we had. So let's not make it all too long. If it's very exciting, then we can maybe plan a second moment to talk more about it. So I don't know how much if like I know Max read it. I don't know if most of people here read the proposal already. Okay, I see some yeses and some no's. I will just start explaining it. Yeah, so I was thinking about a basic income, which I think is very valuable to have in Seeds. I was thinking, how can we design like ambitious things into Seeds that are already possible, because Seeds is still young. Seeds doesn't have that much liquidity yet. So how can we make that happen? And for the basic income, I thought of something that I believe can work very well, and that's when I started developing this proposal. And the first insight in this is you can make money in a way that it expires. We already know this from the gratitude token. The gratitude token expires at the end of the cycle if you haven't used it. And with the basic income, I'm thinking of a similar principle to make sure that if the basic income isn't used, it flows back into the system. And as an addition to this, to make Seeds actually thrive from this basic income, organizations have to apply for the basic income, and there needs to be an easy protocol for the community to decide that this is indeed a bare necessity that the organization is offering. So there is an interest for the organization to do this, because we are getting basic income every lunar cycle that is going to expire. So we have value in our wallet that if there's no organizations aligned, we cannot use it. So it's waiting to be spent. So it's really interesting for an organization to onboard and be able to have their groceries paid by basic income that we are holding. And in this way, we are incentivizing organizations to join, which is bringing value to the system. And we just have to keep the basic income low enough that it doesn't bring less value to the system than spending this basic income. And then when organizations are joining, and you can get a basic income when you contribute to Seeds in your own way, because that's the beautiful thing the basic income allows. You can contribute in a way that doesn't have to be measurable and rewarded at the same time. So people are going to be more interested to join the Seeds because they can contribute to Seeds and get this basic income from bare necessities. And at the same time, we are directly functioning in the way we want Seeds to function, because we have these shops that share bare necessities, that sell bare necessities that you can spend your basic income on, and it's more interesting to spend your basic income because it expires. So in this way, we are stimulating people to buy regenerative products, because we want to like not only have it be bare necessities, but regenerative bare necessities. So that is shortly told the idea. So I'm curious what you guys think about it so far, and if there are more questions, I think based on these questions I can maybe elaborate more on the specifics.
Can I jump in, Bart?
Yeah.
Cool. So I've made some comments in the forum. I mean, I love the idea, certainly from a marketing and an onboarding perspective. Right now, Seeds is much more geared to onboarding organizations around a particular project, and then there's proposals and all the rest. From a pure growth perspective, a UBI, actually, I don't like the word basic. I prefer universal abundance income, but we can argue about names later on. So here you're taking people who are not necessarily allied with an organization. So there's just huge advantages in getting the growth of the Seeds ecosystem happening very quickly. My concern, though, is this chicken and egg situation. So let's just use the example that I'm familiar with here in South Africa. If you had overnight 1,000 people coming on wanting a UBI, but there's nowhere for them to spend it, what's the point? You know, they can get these tokens on an app on their phone, but it doesn't help that they can go and buy their basic necessities. So the approach that we're taking in South Africa is, let's see if we can get a marketplace established first, long before you introduce Seeds. And it's saying, not sure if I'm getting, you're saying basically, can we exchange things amongst ourselves before Seeds comes along? You don't even mention anything about a crypto token or some other form of payment. And now you've created an independent economy. That's the thing that I think is most key here, is when you're talking about basic necessities, you don't want to still go and support the usual supermarket that's part of a global chain. So you want to instill the thinking that actually what you're doing is breaking free from the current economic systems that you have. And my only question in your proposal is, which comes first, that thinking and that local peer-to-peer trade mechanism? Or do you overlay Seeds as a UBI and expect people to somehow morph that thinking by just going to the local supermarket and exchanging Seeds for fiat? So I just think there's some thinking that needs to go into that first, to answer the chicken and egg situation. But otherwise, I love the proposal. I think there's lots of legs, lots to be developed. Thanks. Good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting insight. I saw you responded on the forum, but I didn't have time to read it because of this meeting starting. But I believe you had something similar. I screened through it. I really like what you're bringing up. I think it's interesting from this having a wallet, having money in your wallet that you can't use and that's going to expire, that you have an incentive to create this marketplace. And that this is that's the big reason why I think it's interesting that it isn't functioning at all yet, but you have already this value and everything is into place. So you have this incentive. But yes, it's a really good point that the organizations that would align then do have some connection with the old system. What can we do to create a marketplace that is fully independent from that? I think that's a really interesting discussion that we can look into deeper and see what solutions there are for that. So yeah, that's right. I think Apostle had his hand up first, so go ahead.
Yeah, I have like a basic question of who pays the bill? Who pays for the basic income?
Well, in the first case, I wanted to make a campaign proposal, which is not going to be an extremely high amount. It's going to be a decent amount for the first rounds, and then I have to believe that it's economically sustainable, because how the basic income is going to promote the way Seeds is growing. So there are already incentives for like if someone becomes a resident, you get like 750 seeds. It's quite a lot, I think, and that's because it's worth that much. And I think you can make this value, because this basic income does incentive people to come in and organizations to come in especially, and it promotes especially people to start using seeds, to start circulating it. Not only the basic income, but also if you have spent your basic income, because it becomes a habit to pay with seeds. So it has a lot of incentives that make it super interesting to, in the first place, spend something on it. And also it can cost something, because the platform is going to grow from it, I believe, in the way it is designed. So that is the way it is set up, basically.
Okay, I just want to correct you. The rewards for resident and citizen are actually in deferred seats, so it's kind of like totally different because you can't use them right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, yeah, right now we're at 5,000 people. 5,000 people with 500 seats per person. That's 2.5 million seats.
I've
But
decided that only residents and citizens receive seats. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's much lower. Yeah, so it's around 5. So it's half, like 250,000 seats, which is like better some, I think. Yeah, also, I like the idea of actually creating a pressure to move the seat, but we also cannot defer between a sale and a non-sale right now. So we need to figure out how to defer between those, because otherwise it's just like swapping like seats with someone, and then you fulfill the that said, I think it could work, and we've kind of baked it inside structures like Renaissance Explorers, because you actually like see people being here, and it's actually not basic income in that sense. It's like awarding people for participation. Like you have to participate, you have to actually like be there to do it. And yeah, I think it's a good starting point to think about it.
Okay, great. Yeah, good feedback. I don't think I have direct response on it. I think it's things to take into account to keep working on. You're naming some things that like are not designed in seats in general. I think these things just have to be designed, and that's probably going to happen at the same time as that the basic income would be designed. And then it needs to have the right timing that is also in. These are some external things to indeed think about. But yeah, good points. I remember Lala Gardens, you had or Tina, you had your hand up. Now it's down, so it's finished, or?
No, I did. It's just, it sort of got answered a little bit, and then Apostle kind of developed it further. But it's sort of, there's a tension for me around like creating a marketplace first, only because I'm seeing the limitations of creating more commodification. And so perhaps some of that feedback loop where we're encouraging people to kind of figure out the way to put seeds into flow, that when you're working from a basic income, that it has built into it a responsibility to sort of create those feedback loops or to put them in practice in new ways, could be expanded beyond creating marketplaces into other types of creating flow with seeds. Like for me, it would be through gamification in some ways, or like creating different kinds of liquidity pools or different functions of how to make feedback loops both visible and practiced, besides just buying products.
Yeah, that's a interesting addition. I don't have comments on it, so pass it on to Neil.
Thanks, Bart. Well, I think the idea of perishability with the seeds, I think that's the one thing that's kind of missing. That's very nature oriented. Everything in nature is perishable, especially things that are of value to organisms. There's nothing that's permanent that they hoard. So I really love that's built in. And in our Ambassador Academy, we're a group of us are piloting, bringing 50 people on board. And we're just going to provide the videos, orientation, everything to actually get them to become citizens. And piloting something like this is something I definitely want to onboard. Would love to find someone on board these 50 people with. It's like, you know, if part of the onboarding is gifting them 1,000 seeds to become citizens, how can they use those seeds and to provide some compelling means to actually use them right off the bat, and it's going to expire. I think it's almost kind of fun. As a huge gamification, it says you have these seeds and you got to use them before this certain amount of time. And I think that almost makes it kind of like this fun discussion of how can we actually do that. So I'd love to actually work with piloting it with 50 people, but however this executes.
Cool, yeah, that's indeed interesting too. We can apply expiring seeds as soon as it's designed to other things as well directly. I think that's really interesting indeed. I think for the idea of making citizens, just a comment on that. I think it's important to make sure, like, we don't want everyone to be a citizen, I believe, because citizens are the governors, and you need to want to be a governor to be a governor. We don't all want to be a governor. But I think it's really cool and a good comment. Pass it on to Sam.
Thanks. I mainly wanted to check, because I missed some part, if you introduced also this idea that the basic income, or maybe a different name is emerging, is used for local organic food in the first round, if this was part of the presentation, because in my understanding, this gives a slight different twist, at least for a first round iteration of a prototype, that it has a specific purpose that, in my understanding of seeds, is very close to the focus that exists right now, to be close to the ground, close to this value chain, if you want, that is captured by food. And that for me has a very valuable aspect, that you try in the first round to use the basic income, or the basic food income that you receive, to buy local organic food and approach the people who would be possible suppliers and onboard them so that they ease. Not sure if I'm making sense, but I found this aspect of your idea a valuable aspect.
Yeah, good point. I actually didn't mention it. Indeed, in my story, I called it basic necessities, but indeed, I have this idea of we have different phases to develop the basic income, and I agree, by the way, that there are better names. I like the universal abundance income name. Yeah, in this first phase, the idea is to only allow food and drink organizations, organic regenerative food, to join, because we have to start somewhere, and we start with a low amount of basic income. So then what is the most important basic necessity that we can start with, and that and like food is already aligned with the whole vision of seeds. It's how seeds begun. So I think it's a beautiful way to actually promote seeds even more, to say, okay, the basic income first, to make it also specific, is only for organizations that sell organic food. Yeah, so Thanks for clarifying. I indeed missed that in my story. I think that's indeed an important thing to add. Okay. Bye. Okay, Zhao, so you have your hand up.
Yeah, I want to share some thoughts, but I really like your idea. I'm not like, I'm trying to understand everything what's concerns how to implement seeds locally and the liquidity pool, like how we can globally helping these local places for creating the liquidity pool, right? That's one thing that I could would be like that I want to think about, and imagining some like how to create a stakeholder for creating liquidity field, and maybe for these stakes for these seeds, giving for people to buy these seeds and not for swapping to fiat, but having seeds to sell in a good price, and then this fiat could create local liquidity pools, and that's where I'm also maybe could help for people implement for the local places and local market, because right now I can buy my food, but the vendor is just keeping the seeds. He's not want to sell the seeds. But when he become like a seed millionaire, what's the value for him? You know, it's not. We are trying to expand for more people accepting that then he can use, but we need this liquidity way for producers pay for rent, electricity, things that we can buy with seeds. And I'm thinking more in that, because I don't have an answer for all of this, and I know that your proposal is about to create an income for citizens in seeds, but this, you know, it's where I'm struggling, so I should just share.
Yeah, I think these are good questions to ask. And yeah, I think these organizations that are receiving the seeds, they should be able to exchange their seeds for fiat if they have to, because maybe they just have to, maybe they just don't have another option. But then we already create a regenerative, like a motive to make people consume more regenerative. And if it happens too much, then it's maybe not economically sustainable for the seeds ecosystem. So then we have to figure out a way to solve it, or maybe lower down the basic income, or whatever solution there could be there. But yeah, they should be able to swap it. But the goal is that it grows enough that they can also spend it on other things, that they can pay out their employees in seeds, and that it grows that way. That's finally where we want to get. And as you have this incentive of the basic income, I think it can go really fast. That specifically in a specific region, as soon as some organizations are aligned and some citizens are there, you have this kind of flow that they are going to create a local economy there with seeds. I think the basic income is really something that incentives that. But I think in general, it's just a good question that is also still in research and development, and of which we have to see what's the best way to go. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you give me ideas also for him to paint seeds, and also having idea for the marketplace, helping people to buy the seeds, and with the seeds create incentives for buying things in locally more cheaper, or with some incentives to buy in seeds, you know. So we could selling the seeds for people who will use for inside the local community, and bring fiat in for also for the producers have the fiat when they need. when they want to, well, okay, I'm now it's 10,000 and I want to buy a machine that I only can buy in fiat. Then he come with for us, and then we buy with the fiat and give for him with some for seeds, you know. And then we brought, yeah, grow in the local economy. That's amazing. Yeah, thank you,
Oh, but
Bart. Yeah.
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you too for all your input. Would be great if you join the Discord conversation. I don't know if you found the link already of that, so we can co-create on the proposal.
Yeah, I will read more for sure. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else who wants to share something? I see most of the people have slowly started leaving.
Ogi e Tainara.
Yeah.
Nothing to add. Actually, I like the idea, like the discussions. I'm looking forward to see the post also that you made on the forum around that. So right now, I think no questions, but thank you for the idea and the presentation.
Yeah, if I may add also from here. Yeah, thanks Bart for this. I don't know though yeah, I do have like some concerns about it, similar to those that João spoke. Also, I see a bit triggers in the implementation, as it's going to be like needed to transfer to fiat as long as those markets and vendors are selling the products that are not from the local communities and vendors that are not from like independent from like a huge producers. But generally the idea is beautiful to be involved. Yes.
Thanks, good feedback. Thanks for listening in. And yeah, I think it's definitely very valuable to create a marketplace. Also, especially that has this second layer, that where do the stores get their products from? It would be beautiful if that is also from a place where seeds are accepted. So you have this circulation truly happening. Yeah, that is a process, and I think that is certainly a point of view that I didn't look at yet, that is brought up in this conversation. That is time to look into. And excited to see you guys on the discourse and see what you guys have. I see there's Yao, you put your hand up again.
Yeah, I just want to say that have a good ideas in your proposal, like giving the seats, the short-term seats to use, and giving the universal income. That's a very good idea. I like what I'm reading. Some of the challenge that Apostle brings is also true, and how to. I was imagining some of people joining for this experiment, you know, and by doing that, giving the what they are doing with that, you know, a way for them to tell the stories of how it's helping them, and also then we can see if it's working in what how it's supposed to do, you know. That we just imagine here.
Yeah, good input, sounds good. Don't have any comments on that. I think it's totally right, and it's totally valuable to bring in storytelling as well to yeah, bring up the awareness. Okay, I feel like wrapping up and going to the next thing. I don't know if anyone has a last thing to say.
Have a good day.
It's a sunny day.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya, everyone.
Have a good day to you all too. See you later. Oh, I have one question to anyone that maybe doesn't leave. I see this is recorded. This is now automated, I believe. Do you know where it's gonna go? The recording?
Probably to Reiki or Anna. I don't know who was host.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see. I will ask about it in the Discord.
With the cloud,
Oh.
the cloud record. See you.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Anyways,
Okay, see you, everyone.
have a good day. See you later.
You do. Ciao, ciao.